With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move. It is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Tactics. Thank you so much for being with us here. We are glad that you make us a part of your day every time that you get the opportunity. This is the place where speech isn't violence, tolerance isn't love, and disagreement isn't hate. So we welcome you to the program as we do every time. A few quick announcements that I want to make before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about, because I got to tell you, this is a absolutely jam-packed show. We've got the First Baptist Church in Montgomery, which is caught on fire. We have Huntsville now becoming Alabama's largest city. And we've got a segment on Mayor Reed. And you know, I always get fired up when Mayor Reed is going to be on the program. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Before we do, though, I wanted to say a very quick birthday well wishes to Jessica Dawson, who's a friend of the program. She is responsible for all of the graphics. If you're looking around here, you see up there my Tactics Twitter tag, my logo here, my other logo here. Yeah, it's hard because it's reversed on my side, and so you guys are seeing it a different way than I am. But yeah, all the logos, all the graphics. I do some of the video stuff, but she does almost all of the actual still images because she is our graphic designer here at Tactics. And just wanted to say a very happy birthday to her tomorrow and thank her for all that she does for the show. Most of it she does pro bono, and when I do pay her, it's usually in food. So very generous with her time and helping me out with the show, and we certainly appreciate that. So let's go ahead and talk about something else. I will not be here for next week because I will be flying out early that morning for Amsterdam and eventually heading to Ukraine, where I'll be doing some mission work in the eastern half of Ukraine. And so prayers are always appreciated, not only for safe travels, but also that we will have a fruitful mission while we were there. So next week, when you're not watching the show, you can take that time and pray. Maybe you're a person that prays for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And if so, man, more power to you. But we would certainly appreciate it either way. And unfortunately, because you guys remember, I was actually supposed to go to Ukraine a couple weeks ago, and we had to delay because of issues with my health. But it looks like I am going to be able to go. We were able to reschedule it, but that also means I will not be able to speak at a rally that I was going to go to on the Capitol steps, which is on October 16th. Originally, I thought that it wasn't going to be a conflict even with the rescheduled thing, but turns out October 16th, I'm going to be getting back quite late. And so because of that, I have sent a very apt replacement, Brian Dawson, who's with Alabama Policy Institute. The guy's a conservative, and he knows what he's talking about. So instead of me talking about media bias at that rally, it's going to be him. But, you might even be getting the better deal with Brian. He really knows what he's talking about. So go and see him at the Capitol steps at the rally on October 16th. That's an event that I really hate that I'm going to miss, but, duty calls. And as much as I love politics, preaching the gospel to people is just more important. And so I'm going to be off doing that, but that does not mean you guys cannot have a fantastic time at the October 16th rally. So be sure to do that. You can check out the details on Facebook. There's going to be, I think, 8 speakers. It's a great place to meet like-minded people and to show your support. And there's going to be some really fantastic speeches. I won't be one of them, unfortunately, but Brian will. And I think there's going to be a few other people there. I know that there's going to be 8 speakers. So I believe the event lasts like 2 to 3 hours. But something that is well worth your time, and the weather's getting a lot nicer, so it's not going to be like sweltering heat like it always seems to be when I go to the Capitol steps. Seems like every event I do at the Capitol, it's always really freaking hot or freezing cold. There's no in between. But regardless, that's what's going on. So now on to the news of the day. First of all, and this one is a really big story that hasn't got a ton of media attention, and I get it because it's so local. But we're actually going to get into why I think it's not getting a ton of media attention a little bit later. There was a fire at First Baptist here in Montgomery. And, it's not a church that I've attended. I'm not even a Baptist, so it's not my congregation. But they think it's arson. And that is an attack on a person's faith. And even though I certainly would align religiously and theologically much more with the Baptists than I would, say, a Muslim, I'd be saying the same thing if this were a mosque or a synagogue or I don't even know, temples or whatever else other religions use. An attack on a religion, I mean, first of all, it's a crime. It's illegal to set fire to a building regardless, because you never know what you're going to damage. You never know who you're going to damage. There might be someone in the building you don't know. And so there's lots of reasons why it's a terrible idea and morally wrong regardless. You could catch other buildings on fire, so on and so forth. But an attack on this, and done specifically because of a religion and what someone believes, is completely anti-American. The idea is we can all live together and disagree, but coexist peacefully. That's what tolerance actually looks like. You know, we hear a lot about tolerance, and it's part of my motto of the show. Speech isn't violence, tolerance isn't love, and disagreement isn't hate. It's absolutely true that tolerance is not love, and it doesn't meet that high standard that Christ set for Christian people. But it is also true that tolerance is an important thing. And the idea that we can disagree and it doesn't mean that I wish ill towards you, or in this case, actually try to burn your place of worship because of that, is a key tenet of what it means to be an American. They do suspect arson. Montgomery Fire and Rescue put this out the other day, and this actually happened sometime yesterday between 2 and 4 a.m. on Thursday morning. And the damage, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's terrible. We've got some pictures that we took from the Montgomery Advertiser that they put out. It's not horrible by any stretch of the imagination. So you can see there, you have some of the floors tore up. Part of that, I don't know, it looks like a ticket booth to me. I don't know exactly what that is or what its purpose is. Maybe it's a baptistry and it just has that I'm not sure. Either way, not really important. And you can see another image here where there was a pew that was damaged pretty badly. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still terrible. It's still horrific. It still takes a sick individual to torch a place just because it's a place of worship that he happens to disagree with. But you can see there, if you go back to this and then look at the burnt pew, and there were more pictures and there were pieces of carpet that got burned, but the damage really isn't terrible. In fact, they're going to be having service inside the building on Sunday, from what I hear. And so, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to excuse the attack at all because there wasn't a ton of damage or the building didn't burn down completely. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying I think it's something that we can all be grateful for, that the damage was kind of minimal and mostly cosmetic. And so there's not structural damage. The building isn't unsafe now. And that's important because this, regardless of your religion or whether you would agree with the people inside the building or not, this is a historic building for the city of Montgomery. This is a building that has been there for 192 years. Now, think about that. 192 years. That means it wasn't real long after this country was settled. I mean, only a few decades, because the Constitution's just a little bit north of 245 years old. So, looking at this, that means that this building's not a lot younger by our perspective than the founding of this country. And so this is a very old historic building. And another thing too, this church on Perry Street, First Baptist, Kay Ivey is a person that attends this church. Apparently this is the congregation that she usually goes to. I didn't know that until this story came out, but Kay Ivey actually released a statement about it the other day. I was going to read it, but I mean, it's pretty standard stuff. Nothing, to complain about. It was a good statement. She said she hated the fact that this happened to her church, and she's very bothered by it, which, I mean, I don't see how you could not be. I would react the same way if my church were attacked like this as well. But then a thought struck me. Was this church attacked because it's Kay Ivey's church? Now, personally, I'm somebody that follows politics. I read a lot about the governor, and I had no idea that First Baptist was the church she attended. So maybe I'm just grasping at straws here. This is strictly speculation, and I want to make that very clear. I don't have any inside information. I'm not I'm not talking to a source that I can't tell you about, which I do on the program sometimes. But this is not one of those cases. I am just, throwing this out there to see what people think. And, I just want to make it clear. I don't have anything to lead me to believe that that was the motivation. But was it? Is this somebody that doesn't like the governor? Or maybe doesn't like the governor's religion and because of that attacked her church? Maybe this was somebody that had their heart set on attacking a church and they weren't sure which one they were going to go with. So because they really don't like KIV either, they just kind of figured they'd kill two birds with one stone and attack the church that KIV attends. I mean, usually the people that are torching churches, with a few rare exceptions, they're not people that know a whole lot about churches, and so it doesn't really matter to them which church they attack, normally speaking. I mean, there are surely some exceptions to that, but normally that's the case. And so my question is, did KIV, being someone who goes to that congregation, is that a motivation for this? We don't know, but if something about that comes up, we will certainly let you know about that. But one thing that is disturbing, and one reason that I think actually that this might be a factor, I mean, I am making a guess, but it is an educated guess, and it's not based on nothing. It's just a hunch and based on some recent trends that we're seeing. Could be a complete coincidence. And I would not really be all that surprised if it was a coincidence. But the truth is, there are churches that are being attacked, vandalized, and burnt all over the country. This is a trend that has been happening, not just in America, but all over the world. And so to kind of give you an idea about that, Canada especially has seen an unprecedented level of attacks on churches in just the past few months. I'm not talking about something that's been going on, a trend that's been happening for a decade. Although if you look at it, I believe that that's actually also up, but it's not like, a giant spike or anything. But if you're looking over the past few months, it is a pretty big spike. And so one of the stories that I wanted to reference here, because I don't think that this gets talked about or gets nearly enough media attention, you can look here in a article from True North, which, by the way, is a Canadian news source. You can see the headline there about 68 churches that have been vandalized or burned since the residential schools announcement. So what this centers around, and when you see residential schools announcement, I need to explain a little bit. The 68 churches in Canada have been vandalized, burned, or desecrated since the announcement last month of the apparent discovery of graves found near a residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia. So for those of you that are unaware of this story, and I've only been kind of following it, so I'm by no means an expert, but apparently there were some child graves that were found in an area that was controlled by the church, and they believe that the church, and this is a long time ago now, these are graves that would have been, decades old. So this is not a recent development. They found the corpses of indigenous people, and they believe that people that were running the churches were murdering, Eskimos, Native Americans, that kind of thing, and burying them in sort of shallow graves in land that controlled by the church. And I haven't followed that story really closely, but here's the thing. A lot of these attacks are happening not to the church where this was discovered and not even near that. And so what a lot of people are suspecting, and I think that there's good reason to believe this based on the way that it's happening, is a whole bunch of people that wanted to attack churches anyway are now just using this as an excuse to attack any church just wherever they happen to live. And, we've seen this in other places as well. There are people that, for example, have an animosity towards ICE in Seattle. You know how many illegal immigrants are in Seattle? It ain't many. It's pretty far north. But these people have an animosity towards ICE here in our country because of the illegal immigration thing, and they'll attack an ICE building basically just using random events that happen on the border. Some of them not true, like this most recent one with the whipping of the person trying to come across the border, when it turned out that was just a piece of the reins and it was a complete lie. And we actually have video footage to prove that it was just a made up, crock of crap, basically. It's the same kind of thing. It's not really that the people that they're attacking did anything wrong. It's that they're angry and don't like this group anyway. And so they use this as an excuse to go forward with attacking people. And that is the conclusion that a lot of people have made. Even even Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, who is by no means somebody on the right, came out and denounced the attacks because this has become such a big problem in Canada. And some of these attacks were happening even before this discovery was made. For example, there were several churches that were attacked and burned, even because these were churches that would not comply with the COVID-19 stuff. And we saw some of this, not on the same scale, but similar here in America. You'll remember that there were stories of churches being attacked in Texas. There were stories of people leaving nails in the parking lot, trying to pop people's tires when they did the drive-in services in Mississippi. Like, we've seen stories like this even here in America and in Canada, where this stuff it was locked down much tighter than us. People were in an absolute panic. There were a lot of terrorists because that's what they are, using violence to try to put forward and further a political goal. That is terrorism. That's the textbook definition of it. And so these people were going into churches and burning them down because these were churches that continue to hold worship services despite shutdown orders. And so these are things, what's happening here is there's a lot of things that people are actually trying to get to. They're trying to find some kind of excuse to attack people that they already don't like. And so they're just waiting for a news story to pop up and be like, oh, that's it. Let's go ahead and attack that church now. That's what's actually going on here. And like I said, the proof here is that these attacks have actually been going on since before the announcement of these graves being discovered because of the COVID thing. And unfortunately, the church is under attack worldwide. And we're seeing this in America too. This is not something that is only in Canada. If you look at this headline, which comes from the Washington Times, Catholic churches are being attacked. And there are other denominations of churches being attacked. It's just that, Catholics keep up with stuff like this because they're so organized. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops reported 93 incidents as of August 24th in 28 states. So not even just in one location, since May 2020. May 2020. That's only a little over a year ago. And we've already had 93 attacks on Catholic churches. Continuing on, including arson, statues beheaded, limbs cut, smashed, and painted, gravestones defaced with swastikas and anti-Catholic language, and American flags next to them burned. That figure may be low, C.J. Doyle, Catholic Action League executive director, said. The list left off 12 of the 15 incidents during that period in Massachusetts, but did include a Molotov cocktail thrown last year at a church door in Weymouth. So that was an attempted arson, obviously. Putting a Molotov cocktail together and throwing it into a building or trying to throw it into a building, that you're attempting to burn the building when you do that. And so he's saying, yeah, I know of at least 15 incidents in Massachusetts, and 12 of them were left off of the list that had the 93, which means actually that number is probably pretty low. Now, those attacks might be higher in Massachusetts than in other places, but the point is it's happening. Now, whether they're trying to justify it through churches breaking COVID-19 protocols or whatever else it is, Christians are being attacked in this country. And unfortunately, I think what we're doing is we're seeing the evolution of this. Because first, they were just kind of nudging us. The watchword of the day was bake my cake, bigot. If you're a Christian, you can't operate in a business and actually exercise your faith. And then they got a little more aggressive and shut us down and said, you can't go to church at all. We're shutting you down. And if you try to show up and worship, we're going to lock you up. And it's for your protection. Now there's people just straight up going and burning churches. And this has always been a problem throughout the history of the church, but it's getting pretty bad right now. Now, we're not at like Nero and Caligula levels of it yet. I understand that. We're not having the Roman Emperor Domitian putting together armies and brute squads to take us out. I understand that. But I'm just saying the anti-Christian animosity is starting to reach a fever pitch in this country. And I'll tell you why. It's because there are two worldviews really at war with one another now. It's the same fight that we've been having for eons. Will we serve the true God or the spirit of the age, the gods of this world, the elementary principles of the world, as Paul put it? Because that's really the fight that we're having. Are we going to sacrifice our kids to the gods for convenience so that we may have a more prosperous life like they did in ancient times? Or are we going to actually live by the morals that God revealed to us both at Sinai and through his son, Jesus Christ? That's the choice we've got. These are completely, fundamentally incompatible worldviews. And they cannot coexist. There is one or there is the other. There is no walking the road in between. Jesus Christ did not leave enough room open for that. You either follow him or you don't follow him. That's it. And the reason that you're put in that position is because a follower of Christ can follow Christ by himself, and he still has to evangelize, and he still has to speak truth when he sees evil. But the truth is, at the end of the day, he can live being the only Christian in the world and still be working out his religion with fear and trembling, regardless of what everyone else does. The reason that the two ideologies cannot coexist is because the other side will not allow it. They will not tolerate someone who follows God instead of their edicts. They won't do it. And this has been true all throughout the Old Testament. All the pagan nations, they were the same way with Israel. And so we're just living out exactly what's been going on, the struggle that mankind has had since the beginning of time. Will we follow God, or will we follow the Parthenon of pagan gods? Those are the only two options at this point. And so that's really what we're seeing. This is just a realization of that. Now, can you imagine if this same thing, 90 plus synagogues, 90 plus mosques, were being attacked, vandalized, or burned? Can you imagine the media outrage that would happen? I mean, we would be talking about nothing other than that for weeks on end. And yet when it's a bunch of Catholic churches, and again, I said that number is probably low based on some of the incidents that we've heard about recently, and that's not even counting Protestant churches, non-denominational churches. For example, this Baptist attack that happened here in Montgomery, that's not something that would be counted in that because they're not Catholics. And so what's the actual number? 2, 3, 4, 500? I don't know. But the point is, it's going largely unreported by the media. And why is this the case? Keep in mind that Joe Biden, our houseplant in chief, is indeed a Catholic. The man is someone that claims to be a devout Catholic and says that his faith is extremely important to him. Why would he not say anything? Apparently, this guy who they interviewed at the Washington Times, the article that we just saw, this guy is the leader of a big Catholic organization. He has reached out to Joe Biden and asked him to condemn the attacks, and he hasn't done it. Why? This doesn't make any sense. Except it kind of does. And I'm going to show you why right now. So look here. This is from that same Washington Times article. Worshippers arrived to Mass to find abortion graffiti defacing church signs, sanctuary entry doors, garden signs, and the wall surrounding the building. The police department said in a Monday statement, the spray-painted messages included "My body, my choice," "Bands off our bodies." Vandals also sprayed over the word "life" on a Respect Life garden stone to make it read "Respect Bodily Autonomy," as shown in photos posted by police. Now it makes sense. Now, I don't know what the motives are in every single one of these 93 plus attacks. I'm not sure. Maybe even a majority of them were not fueled by people that are attacking the Catholic Church because of its stance on abortion. But the point is, there's some that are. And since that's the only motive that we know from these attacks, at least as far as I can tell, maybe the reason Biden's not exactly chomping at the bit to talk about the attacks on churches that are supposedly part of his denomination are because he doesn't want to have the tough conversation of, oh yeah, and the reason that they're doing this is because they support abortion and the Catholic Church doesn't. You see, Biden ain't going to touch that story with a 10-foot pole because it paints him in a bad light on two different fronts. First of all, it points out to the world something that everyone already knows, that he is acting against his own faith, his own religion, by being a supporter of abortion when his church says that it's murder. And then the second half of that is he does not want the optic of we have radical church burning pro-abortion advocates going around burning buildings just because they disagree with people on abortion. He does not want to talk about that. It's the same thing with the Black Lives Matter, where they keep saying, no, it's a mostly peaceful protest. You know, sure, there's buildings burning behind me and people setting cars ablaze and throwing concrete center blocks at one another. But yeah, it's mostly peaceful. That's what's going on here. You see, it's not about truth and it's not about right and wrong. It's about the narrative that can be crafted and how many people we can get to the polls in 2022. That's what's actually going on here. And when you understand that, all of this actually makes a lot more sense. Sad, but true. But that's part of the reason. And now you have some context and understand why I've looked into this and said, maybe this church being Kay Ivy's church has something to do with why they chose to arson this particular one. Why they chose to set this particular church on fire and try to burn it to the ground. Because even though you all know that I have my disagreements with Ivy on a lot of things, and I'm very vocal about that, at the end of the day, she has been pretty good on the issue of abortion. Not as good as she should be, but by and large, she has been an outspoken advocate for the stance of being pro-life. And I do commend her on that. And it may also be the reason why people are attacking this church. At least that would be consistent with the trends that we are seeing in Canada and in America and in other places across the globe. So it could be that. It could be her rhetoric against Joe Biden's vaccine mandate, which, of course, you know, that's been kind of a topic of conversation recently. So maybe that's it, because that would be more consistent with what's going on in Canada. And like we said, we've seen attacks on churches in America that have gone to church despite shutdown notices and whatnot as well. So it could be that. I don't know. Might just be a coincidence, but we will have to see, and we'll definitely try to keep you up to date on that. So whatever the motive is, I just really hope they bring these people to justice. That ultimately is what I would want more than anything else. Another interesting story that came about, and this is actually an older story. It's one that happened while I was gone, but I thought it was pretty cool, so I figured I'd mention it. Alabama's largest city is no longer Birmingham. It's Huntsville. So the 2020, the results of the census actually came out while I was gone, and Huntsville is now the largest city in the state of Alabama. So that's pretty cool. You can see this from WSFA 12. It's been talked about for quite some time, but now it's official. Huntsville is the biggest city in the state of Alabama. In a report just released by the U.S. Census Bureau, Huntsville's population hit 215,006 in April 2020. That's an 11.2% increase since 2010. Holy cow. Man. Seriously, think about that. An 11.2% increase in population in just a span of a decade, that's a lot. That is a very fast growing area. I mean, think about it in this terms. This isn't exact math, but it's roughly, somewhere in the ballpark. Let's say if you walked out into the city of Montgomery and there's 100 people there, that means if you added 11 people, but did that for every 100 people in the city, that's how much growth that is. That's a big, big spike for a city. And also the other three major cities, the one that we're currently in, the capital city, and Birmingham and Mobile, have actually all gone down recently. Let's look at Birmingham's population and its recent decline. Birmingham previously took the crown as the largest city in Alabama, but state leaders have been predicting Huntsville to make the jump to the top for the past few years. According to that same 2020 census report, Birmingham's population dropped to 200,733. That's a negative 1.5% decrease since the 2010 census. Yee. So what's the difference in these two? And what's going on with Montgomery's population and Mobile's population? Although, to be fair, we really should look at the population of all of these just to, give some clarification here. So if you look, these are the population from AL.com of the four major cities in the state of Alabama. And you'll notice that Birmingham's population has dropped a lot. And Huntsville's has grown exponentially. Montgomery's, it grew some and then kind of leveled off from 2010 to 2020. And so we haven't really changed that much. Mobile had been stable, but has dropped off a little. But the point is, all three of the other cities right now are in decline. I mean, are we in a catastrophic decline? No, I don't think that's fair to say. But you look at, Birmingham used to be well over 300K. And now it's barely above 200 and has been surpassed by Huntsville. That's not a small deal. And the reason for that, I think, is pretty obvious. What is different about Huntsville and the other areas? Well, Huntsville does have some advantages. It's recently had a pretty big upsurge in business. But the pro-business policies are probably the cause of that. And the fact that, they have a Republican, Tommy Battle, who is the mayor of that city, who's a fiscal conservative and believes in saving money and even ran for governor against Kay Ivey recently. I think that that's got a big thing to do with it. I mean, you look at cities like Detroit and Chicago, those places have been under Democrat leadership forever. And you see what's happened to them. And even though Montgomery just recently actually had Strange as a Republican mayor, yeah, we had a Republican mayor, but was he fiscally responsible? Not really. He kind of liked spending money and didn't seem to have a problem with taxing people. And so at best, he was a moderate Republican. And so I think these policies, just kind of bear it out. When you actually create an environment where people are safe, secure, there's good schools for their kids, and it's business friendly, that's how you get Huntsville. As long as you do those few things, people are going to flock to your city more or less. I mean, unless there's some kind of weird outlier there. So